Hello, my lonely subscriber. This is episode 2 of Introvert Wine, and in today's episode, I really wanted to talk about the language of wine. And really, how do we describe the wine in different languages? Is it really different? And does overall knowing a foreign language help you to study wine or get a job in the wine industry? And the hottest of all topics is the artificial intelligence, its presence in content creation, and the hottest of all questions, will the wine writers be out of their jobs soon? And I present to you my guest today is Raul Guizzo, and I really wanted to speak about the language of wine or overall languages with a person like, especially a person like Raul, who is a polyglot like me, and exchange our thoughts and experiences on the topic.
Hi, I'm Raul. A little bit about myself, so you know where I'm coming from. Starting with my education. So I come from a humanities background. So I studied languages, literature, mainly English and Spanish, and that kind of led me to a career in teaching. So I was teaching in Spain, Portugal, Singapore, different countries. And that is kind of what led me into wine, because I wanted to use my humanities background in a different way. So I found this very interesting master called Wintour, which that's how Senya and I met. We both did this master program that's all about wine tourism innovation. Um, so and that led me kind of to the world of wine through different internships besides the education. Lots of visits to wineries throughout Spain, France, and Portugal, and then internships with different companies in wine. Um, so that's that's how I got into wine. So I worked as a tour guide, both in the Douro Valley here in northern Portugal, um, and also at a port wine cellar, Coburn specifically, which is owned by Symington Family Estates. So I was there as an intern while I was working on my thesis, um, and then I continued on for about a year working as a guide there. I considered switching to a marketing position with that company, but then I found my current job, which is as a writer and an editor for Tour Scanner, which is a website that sells guided tour packages and things like that. So right now, my job is kind of indirectly related to wine because we do sell packages related to wine tours and wine tastings. And sometimes I get to write content about different wine regions. Um, but it's more indirectly related, but it's still, and in the future, I'm looking forward to working more directly with wine in tourism.
So the very first, and I think the very basic question is, does knowing foreign languages help learning wine or working in the wine industry? Can you share your experience, your background, and your take on that?
Yeah, for sure. Of course, it depends exactly in what. So, for example, if you're planning to work as a tour guide, of course, the more languages you know, the better, and the better you can speak them, the better, because the more hospitable you can be when you welcome somebody to to the winery or wherever you're working, the better it is in terms of hospitality. Um, and then and then also if you're working on the marketing side as well, to tell, storytelling is a big part of marketing and especially with wine. So, and to be able to effectively tell a story about the wine, it's very helpful to to know the language of the region where it's produced and the language that the winemakers speak, for example.
So, as both of us, we do speak different foreign languages. In your experience, is there a difference in wine language and how we describe and how we speak about wine in those languages? For example, I feel like we're gonna touch on some stereotypes there, like being German being very harsh, or French sounding very romantic, or Spanish and Portuguese sounding very descriptive. have you got any experience when you're working as a tour guide, for example, when you spoke and you presented the wines or the wine regions in different languages, that those descriptions, the wine language that you used actually sounded differently in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that comes up quite a bit, because, there's, French and German pronunciation can be a bit tricky, especially, coming, I didn't explain my background. So like I was born in the US, so English is my first language, but I also speak Spanish and Portuguese as well. So those languages, I'm pretty comfortable with any of the pronunciations, but of course you come across a lot of French and German words as well. So one example I have, when I was working over the summer at Quinta de Covella, which is located in the Vinho Verde region in Portugal. They do mostly native grapes, but they do have a few international varieties, one of them being the German variety Gewürztraminer, which I think I pronounced correctly. Um, but it took me many, many guided tours to be able to finally pronounce it right. I would always say this German grape that starts with the G, but I used it as kind of a joke, to make the guests feel a little bit more comfortable. Because I think sometimes people are nervous around wine because they don't want to be seen as ignorant. So if I could admit as the guide that I didn't know how to pronounce this grape, I think it helped kind of make them feel a lot more comfortable.
Oh yeah, totally, definitely, I can agree with that. And even not when you're learning about the wine and you get to learn all these different French appellations, German wines, German styles of wines, Italian wines and regions, I think it's overwhelming. So what I felt in my case is that when I knew how at least to pronounce certain regions or letters or specific words like chateau or schiappitino, like even the letters coming together, I felt already that gave me a lot of confidence. It doesn't mean that you need to learn a new language each time you learn something about a new wine region, but at least knowing the main names, the main also rules of reading, as simple as that, already gives you a lot of confidence and motivation. And well, it's just makes your life easier to pronounce and to learn all of those words. And I do remember that, again, like touching on the German pronunciation, that we had a lot of classes on the German wines and styles, and the moment people saw the Trockenbeeren Auslese, which is TBA, and then they ask what does TBA stand for, and then the teacher goes, oh, Trockenbeeren Auslese, people would freak out, and there was like, okay, I'm done with German wines, like never studying those again in my life. But do you feel now that speaking a foreign language, at least one, is already a sort of obligatory? It's not something on top, it's not a nice to have, it's already like a must have to speak, well, your native language, I assume, whatever is different from English, then English is certainly a must have. And then on top of that, you're expected to speak another language, especially if you work in hospitality or in sommelier, where you deal with different customers and clients from all over the world.
Yeah, so for my internship as a tour guide, like three languages was kind of like the minimum to be hired. Because here in Portugal, like, of course, everybody speaks Portuguese and they pretty much speak Spanish because they're similar languages, so they can get by. And then they speak English, and oftentimes they'll speak one more language. So, like, in order to kind of compete or to be accepted, or also just to be effective for the scheduling, like, most places are going to give tours mostly in English, but they want to accommodate for the local language and then also for other major languages. So if you speak German or Italian, like, you would definitely get hired for sure because they want to be able to give tours in German and Italian, and they're much less common languages for people to speak here in Portugal. And French as well, of course.
Can you share if you feel like, for example, when you are giving a tour or describing a wine region, or I don't know, from any of your personal experience, that you do kind of notice that you sound differently, or you use in a different word, a different descriptor, or a different group of words when you're speaking about the wine in English versus you're doing the same tour, the same wine, but in a different language, for example, in Spanish. Does this happen to you? Is this something, not only the stereotype that we have in our head, but something that is proven kind of linguistically, that we do speak differently about wines in different languages?
Yeah, so I've found that, I mean, even outside of wine, um, just learning Spanish and Portuguese and things like that, like I found that I speak differently because, yeah, you tend to have a different personality in those languages because the language kind of influences how you think about things and how you react to things. Um, so, I mean, I've read there's a lot of linguistic and philosophical debates about, which comes first, like the personality or the language. Um, so I think there's no escaping that, when you deal with different languages in wine. Um, um, so I mean, some examples I can think of is kind of in English in general. They like to use abbreviations. They like to be precise. Whereas maybe in some other languages, like Spanish and Portuguese, maybe it's a bit more romantic in a way, a bit more descriptive, a bit less precise. um, yeah, I don't know in your experience if you, yeah.
I'm afraid I'm gonna go into those stereotypes again, but like we had recently very heated, not heated, actually a very interesting discussion about the descriptors of wine at the Italian ambassador course that I did recently in Verona, and we had a very, very multinational group from literally every country in the world, and we had a discussion how to describe tannin, because the way I feel the way we approach it is very cultural as well. And I feel like wine is a very cultural product overall. But the descriptors of tannins were, depending who was describing those, from ranging from silky, velvety, soothing, enveloping, this very emotional, I would say, very sensational descriptors, versus some of the other people were more on the like harsh, grainy, sandy tannin. And I find that this was also texture, but a very different perception of it. And it was interesting to compare and to understand that we do feel the wine differently. We're tasting the same wine, but we are talking about it in a very different way, which was not surprising but quite interesting to me personally. And I feel as well that the popularity, the success of different wine courses and certifications is hidden in creating this universal language, the language that we can use in different cultures and countries, different backgrounds, and be sure that we are understood correctly. So if we are speaking at the tasting approach by WSET, there is a list of descriptors of kind of the levels of certain things that you can relate to, that you can describe to your fellow wine professionals, and make sure you are understood, that you're speaking the same language, that you are speaking about the same wine and you understand the same wine very closely, I guess as close as you can possibly describe and understand the same wine. I do still feel that at least knowing the rules of pronunciation in different languages helps you to pronounce them correctly on a professional level. If you're working with wine, if you're working in the wine industry, at least that's kind of a bare minimum, is trying to pronounce the wines, the styles, the regions correctly, because that also shows your level and your preparation, your education, and your motivation to learn and to relate to the job you're doing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a natural influence of that because when you're writing about a specific wine or a specific place, like you're just you have to use you're using the place names, so you're using the names of the winemakers, you're using the names of the region and the cities, and you're using the local names for the grapes, for example. So that can lead you into using language that's related to that because like once you're receiving all these foreign words, it's natural that you're gonna write in a certain way. um, Even use more, like for example, when I'm speaking a lot in Spanish or Portuguese, I find that my English gets influenced and I form my sentences in ways that would be more common to form in a Romance language than in English itself. So I think that happens quite a bit. And it just gives opportunity to explain things as well. Like again, going back to when I was working in Quinta de Covela, there's there's star grape in that region and in that quinta, or quinta is the vineyard in Portuguese. Um, their star grape is called Aveso, which I didn't know anything about before going there. But it's a less common grape in the Vinho Verde region. But it has a lot of interesting history behind the name because this word in Portuguese has a lot of different meanings. Like the basic meaning would be like the kind of turn something inside out or like in reverse kind of thing. But when you use it to describe a person, it's somebody that's stubborn or difficult or like it's hard to convince or something like that. So that's why they use this word to describe the grape because it's a very difficult grape to grow. Like it doesn't like too much rain, it doesn't like too much sun, it doesn't. So it's like a very finicky person basically that a lot can easily go wrong with it. So that's kind of an example of how going deeper into the language, gives you opportunities to tell stories about that, about the grape or the wine, which makes it more memorable and more interesting.
And now let's talk about the hottest of all the topics, the frequently mentioned, the frequently asked about, the artificial intelligence or AI. Many views on how it affects the roles of wine communicators and writers. Many pros and cons. Do we both use it in our work actually? Are we going to be out of our jobs? Will the jobs evolve? How they will evolve? There's so many questions. I feel like everybody's talking about it now.
Yeah, so um, I mean, I preface it, of course, like everybody. I think nobody really knows what the effect will be. There's a lot of there's a lot of dialogue both ways. Of course, there's the optimistic viewpoint that it's going to help us and it's going to be a useful tool, and then the pessimistic viewpoint that it's going to destroy everything. Nobody will have jobs. Um, and what seems to be the case with most new technologies is that it falls somewhere in the middle, and it works in ways that we could have never predicted. You know. Um, but from my personal experience, like there's been a lot of experimentation with how it can work. So when ChatGPT and all these things first came out, like I was testing it to see how well it could write, different types of content. And at first it was quite bad, like it was just like, okay, this is terrible, like this is bad writing, this is no good. But then, after a few months, it got a bit better. But then, I was editing this kind of AI produced content, and it still tends to fall into kind of these repetitive things. And you could see that it wasn't written by a human, that it lacks personality. Um, so I feel like there's always going to be a need for human input when the industry is very human related. Um, so, and it can also present opportunities for kind of more value for the human perspective and like personal viewpoints and personal experience. So, for example, the company where I work at now, It's a lot focused on kind of Google rankings and SEO, and and there's been a lot of changes in that as well, related to AI and just related to Google updates. So, but for example, Google now puts a lot more value in first person perspective, like proving that you've done the experience. Like, for example, if it's a website selling a phone or selling a tour, like they want to see evidence that you actually, had experience with that. Like they don't want just a general thing that could be written by AI, for example. So I think that lends quite well, to the wine industry, because of course, if you're describing a wine or you're describing a visit to a vineyard, people are going to put value into somebody else's opinion of the experience that they had there. So in a way, it could give even more value to that human experience, which I think wine is always very much connected to that. Like people drink wine not just for the taste, not just for the sensation, but oftentimes it is having, opening a bottle and sharing it with conversations you have around that. Like that's a part of kind of the wine ritual that, that is always going to have a lot of value, I think.
No, absolutely, I can relate to that because I have experimented a lot with artificial intelligence in my job to understand where it works and where it doesn't. And I totally agree that it does feel very not superficial, artificial is a good word. And I think for academia, for kind of this impersonal point of view that is very trying to be objective versus subjective, I think it's perfect. This is how it's written overall in academia and all the research papers. They want you to be kind of not connected to the subject and be as objective as you can. But what I found out as well is I had seen this experiment, which is very nice. I kind of enjoyed it. Is a master of wine competing in describing a wine with a sommelier chat GPT. And what it also came up with the conclusion that they both described the wine, the same wine, and they both describe it accurately. But the take of the master of wine was more personal, was more you can see if he liked the wine, how he felt about the wine, what was his let's say the descriptors were not very objective. Sometimes they were not the universal ones that we use, whereas the ChatGPT, it described it accurately. It gave all the correct nouns and descriptors and adjectives and styles, but you can tell the difference. For example, the description of acidity of the sommelier ChatGPT might have been minus, acidity medium minus, whereas the master of wine would describe as a punching, bright, lean acidity, refreshing, or something like that. And you can totally feel that the subjectivity kind of describes it better depending on what you're looking for, actually. If you need a very technical, very brief description of the wine to understand what it is like, maybe that works for you. But if you want to relate and understand truly your expectations of the wine and how would you feel, then a subjective, a personal, human descriptor would be far, far more pleasant to you. But I also feel that the system, the artificial intelligence, it's still learning, and to compare it with how it was when it's just started, it was very different. For example, it gave me a descriptor of the white wine when I was talking about Cabernet Sauvignon, and that was a bit bizarre. But it's learning for what's already available online, so it's not producing something new. And I see that it has learned and evolved a lot, but it still needs double checking, triple checking, multiple checking, especially in the wine, because the wine evolves so fast. And the artificial intelligence, for example, ChatGPT, does not have access to the I think to the data from the past 2 years. So imagine 2 years of data, and the wine is changing so fast. Each vintage is different. There are multiple producers. There are new styles, new brands emerging. So that doesn't have time to catch up, and it's not technically the most accurate information you can get. And on a more, let's say, I don't know, maybe more philosophical kind of view, it doesn't have this moral principle to judge something. Maybe it's not specifically wine related, but yeah, sometimes it's just off.
Yeah, no. But I would say the wine version of that ethical kind of guidelines would be like if a user would ask, can I mix red and white wine to make rosé? And then the AI would say, no, don't do that. That is not good.
Well, technically you can do that in certain regions, but like outside of Champagne. But
Yeah.
yeah, well, they can kill you probably.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think this is a very interesting topic and very important. And I think it ties into a topic which I was thinking about earlier when you were discussing other things, was like I think in the wine world, wine tasting especially,
Mm-hmm.
there's a similar conversation as in like the art world, for example, of like the objective versus the subjective. Because in a way with wine tasting, like, you're trying to, like we all have our subjective palate,
Yep.
and our tastes are subjective, but then we're trying to describe it in a way that's more general, more objective. So we're trying to kind of bridge that gap between the subjective and the objective. And yeah, and then we see like how can AI help us in that, and how is it not so helpful in that? Because we don't really, maybe we don't need it to replace the subjective, but with some of the technical objective things, it could help, like
Absolutely.
give us a list of descriptors across languages, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, and then that could help us use our subjective capabilities, something like that.
I mean, it's part of our lives, and I feel like it's not gonna go away. Like, I feel like it's I'm more on the accepting side. I'm just learning how to use it, how to integrate, and how for it to be helpful in my work, in my life as well. So I don't feel that I'm gonna be out of the job. No, I just feel that it can create different perspective, different possibilities, and that's also fun to explore. And I've seen or I've read about sommelier robot. I think it's in Hong Kong somewhere, that it's serving you wine, and I don't feel that it's replacing fully the experience and conversation you can have with the normal real life sommelier, but I feel like it's just a fun way to kind of diversify the whole process, the restaurant, the bar experience. Why not? And I mean, it's as I said, it's not replacing human interaction. It's just adding something on top of it, because I don't feel it's compared. I feel it's just totally different thing, because it's not the same. But why not? Like, why not kind of experience?
Yeah, just to brag about it and post on social media that you went to a robot to get a wine, and that's another, like, storytelling I was talking about. It's another story to tell.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but yeah.
No, and I also don't know if the recommendations would be like totally the same or different, and what you're gonna get out of this experience, but just out of fun. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, speaking about not liking something because you don't understand it, that reminded me of sometimes when serving people port wine, and people just not understanding sweet wines, and just having a blockade, like, I don't like sweet wines because they're sweet. I don't like sweet wines because they're sweet. And just not being able to overcome. But it was rewarding sometimes when people did try it for the first time, and after taking the tour, they did understand that it was a high quality wine, that a lot of a lot of work went into it. So they gave it a chance, and they really enjoyed it. So I think that's with that is kind of human nature as well. It's kind of
Yeah,
fearing new things, and then maybe as a sommelier, kind of your job is to get people not to fear new things
it
sometimes,
is.
and
It
like
is. Yes, it is.
uh, to expand their horizons.
Oh, we're trying our best, I guess.
Yeah. Can I take just one more
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
related to this
Go.
AI and technology and
Yep.
stuff, and about predicting the future? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I saw somebody posted about Taylor Swift promoting her album on vinyl,
Mm.
and with the caption like, "Who could have predicted that, in the year 2024, like an artist would be promoting their like a vinyl version of their album, like,
Mm-hmm.
when we have streaming, when we have, I mean, CDs is already gone, but so I think kind of wine, a lot of aspects of wine fits into that kind of retro, or not even retro, but kind of like timelessness.
Mm.
It's something that's been around for so long. Um, and I've even seen it like sometimes in like sci-fi films, like they're in space and they still have a bottle of wine, like as kind of like this connection to the earth and connection to the past and kind of humanity and stuff like that. So I think wine has that going for it, like
Mm.
with whatever technological changes that we're going to have in the future. I think it has that kind of humanity and kind of earthiness to it, that even if there's a lot of technology used in winemaking, like it still has that kind of that connection.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking to kind of have this new rubric in the end to ask my guest a question. What is the next wine region I should explore? What is the wine region I should totally go to and enjoy and explore?
Yeah. So I believe you already visited the Douro,
Yep.
but of course, like I'm biased because I live in northern Portugal. But I still think the Douro is like, it's incredibly beautiful. It's one of those places, like I would compare it to like the Grand Canyon, where you're kind of just in awe of the landscapes, and it just takes you to another level of existence, I would say. But to be more specific, I would recommend visiting kind of a region between two regions, which is the Douro Verde.
Mm.
So it's the Vinho Verde region technically,
Mm-hmm.
but it's along the Douro River. So it's right on the border of where the Douro wine region starts, but it's technically Vinho Verde. Um, so that's you kind of get the best of both worlds, because you get that beautiful river landscapes, that, along the river there. But I would say if you're visiting in the summer, you also get to enjoy a wine that fits much better with the sunshine and the heat,
Mm-hmm.
which is Vinho Verde, because it tends to be light and slightly effervescent. So like it makes more sense to be drinking that than to have like a heavy port wine when it's
Mm.
38 degrees out
Oh yeah,
and sunny.
totally. I really hope you enjoyed our episode today. I think we're gonna dig deep in some of the fun questions and explore the stereotypes of the language of wine. And I urge you to explore it further, because speaking and knowing different languages is really a powerful tool that certainly help you to explore the world, not only get a job, but just explore the universe around, explore the wine world, and be more comfortable while doing it. And in the next episodes, I hope they will still continue to be out in about 2 weeks' time each. And in the following episodes, I wanted to speak about different wine regions like Italy, Austria, and also speak about sommelier job and certifications, and as well, maybe we'll see to present to you a superstar in the sommelier world. So follow us, keep subscribing, and until the next one.